I'm standing outside the Greenville County Courthouse in a coat that's seen better wars than this one. The November air cuts through the old Navy wool, but I don't move. I've been colder. I've been worse places. My name is Sarah Whitmore, 39 years old, former logistics officer, United States Navy, 19 years of service, 2 tours overseas, 1 breakdown that nobody ever saw coming, including me. The courthouse steps are gray granite, worn smooth by decades of people fighting for things that should have been theirs all along. I know that feeling now. I know it in my bones. They said I was just a ghost, a damaged vet with no place left to go. But ghosts remember things, and I remember everything they stole. You want to know how it feels when your own family erases you. When they smile at your face while signing your name to papers you've never seen. When they rewrite your past so cleanly that even you start to wonder if you imagined the life you lived. It feels like standing in winter wind wearing summer clothes. Everything exposed. Everything raw. But here's what they didn't count on. I spent 19 years managing supply chains for the Navy. I know how to track things. I know how to find what's missing. And I know how to make sure it gets where it belongs. 6 months ago, I came home to South Carolina because my mother had a stroke. I thought I was coming back to help. I thought I was coming back to family. Instead, I found out I'd been dead on paper for 2 years. My house, the one I inherited from my grandmother, the one I paid taxes on, even while deployed, had been sold. My name was on the deed transfer. My signature was on the documents. I never signed anything. The men in suits walking past me don't know they're looking at a woman who's already won. They see the old coat, the careful posture, the way I hold myself like I'm still waiting for orders. They think they're seeing someone who's lost. They're wrong. The flash drive in my pocket weighs less than a quarter, but it contains enough evidence to bury 3 people. The lawyer inside is about to hand it to a federal judge. The same judge who's been wondering why certain property transfers in this county don't add up. If you've ever had someone try to erase your name while smiling to your face, you'll understand what I did next. If you've ever been told you're too broken to fight back, you'll understand why I fought anyway. The courthouse doors open. My attorney nods. Time to remind them that some ghosts don't stay buried. Let me tell you who I was before they decided I was nobody. Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore, born in Greenville General Hospital on a Tuesday morning in March 1986. Oldest of 3 daughters, the responsible one. The one who fixed things before they broke. When I was 8, my youngest sister Jessica would wake up crying from nightmares. I'd slip into her room, sit on the edge of her bed, and tell her stories until she fell back asleep. When my middle sister got in trouble at school, I'd help her with makeup assignments so she wouldn't fail. When my father worked double shifts and my mother got overwhelmed, I'd cook dinner and make sure homework got done. I was the helper, the one who didn't ask for things, the one who made problems disappear. That's probably why they thought erasing me would be easy. At 17, I enlisted in the Navy. Not because I wanted to get away, though I did, but because someone had to pay for Jessica's college and my parents' mortgage. Military logistics seemed like a good fit. I understood supply chains. I understood making sure things got where they needed to be. 19 years, 2 tours in the Persian Gulf managing supply operations for entire carrier groups. I tracked millions of dollars in equipment across oceans. I knew how to move mountains of materials without losing a single bolt. I was good at it. Really good. The breakdown came in year 18. Not from combat, I never saw direct action. It came from watching younger sailors die in accidents that could have been prevented. Equipment failures, supply chain mistakes, small errors that cost everything. One night I couldn't sleep, then I couldn't eat, then I couldn't get out of bed. The Navy doctors called it adjustment disorder with depressed mood. Mild PTSD, nothing that couldn't be managed. I took medical leave, got treatment, came back stronger. But that mild diagnosis, that became their weapon. See, when you're the oldest daughter, the helper, the one who doesn't ask your family, gets used to you being invisible. They get used to making decisions without you. They get used to your name being a tool they can use when convenient. When I was deployed, they'd tell neighbors I was taking care of things overseas. When I sent money home, they'd deposit it without mentioning where it came from. When I inherited my grandmother's house, they managed the property to help me out. I was useful. Until I wasn't. The discharge papers came through clean. Honorable service, full benefits, a small pension, and a house waiting for me in South Carolina. I thought I was coming home to rest, to reconnect, to be part of a family again. Instead, I found out that invisible can become erased with just a few forged signatures. If you've ever been the reliable one, the one who never caused problems, you know how this story ends. If you've ever had your kindness turned into a weapon against you, you'll understand why I stopped being kind. The courthouse doors are opening. Time to show them what 19 years of military precision looks like when it's pointed in the right direction. The call came at 3:47 hours on a Tuesday. I remember because I was reviewing supply manifests for the Norfolk Depot, and the timestamp on my computer screen burned itself into my memory the way important moments do. Sarah, it's Dad. Your mother had a stroke. I was on a plane to Charleston by noon, then a rental car to Greenville. 3 hours of highway with my mind running logistics scenarios, rehab facilities, insurance coverage, care coordination. The things I was good at, the things I could fix. Greenville Regional Medical Center looked smaller than I remembered. The parking lot was half empty on a Wednesday afternoon. I walked through automatic doors that wheezed like old lungs, following signs to the neurological wing. Jessica was waiting at the nurse's station. Still blonde, still perfectly put together in that way that takes 2 hours but looks effortless. She saw me coming and stepped directly into my path. She doesn't want to see you, not hello, not I'm glad you're here. Just a wall of words designed to stop me cold. I just flew in from Virginia. I haven't seen Mom and she's fragile right now. The doctors say stress could cause another episode. Jessica's voice carried that particular tone she'd perfected in high school, reasonable, on the surface, ice underneath. You make things worse. I looked past her toward the room numbers, calculating distances. Which room? Sarah, no, she specifically said. She's unconscious, Jessica. She can't specifically say anything. The nurse behind the desk looked up from her computer. Middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the particular alertness of someone who'd seen family drama play out in hospital hallways before. I'm her daughter, I said to the nurse. Sarah Whitmore. Jessica stepped closer. She's not listed on the emergency contact form. The nurse checked her screen, frowned. I'm sorry, but we can only allow immediate family members who are... I am immediate family. Who are listed as contacts, Jessica finished. Which you're not. I stood there for 30 seconds doing the math. Then I walked away, not because I was giving up, because I was regrouping. The house was next. The 2-story colonial on Maple Street where I'd grown up, where my grandmother had lived before she passed, where I'd sent mortgage payments from 3 different naval bases to make sure it stayed in the family. The sold sign in the front yard hit me like a physical blow. I sat in the rental car for 10 minutes staring at the sign. Then I pulled out my phone and called the county clerk's office. Property records are public information. I learned that during a real estate course the Navy had paid for. I need to check the deed transfer for 1247 Maple Street, I told the clerk. Transferred within the last 6 months. Are you one of the parties involved in the sale? I'm the seller, Sarah Whitmore. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the clerk's office looking at my own signature on documents I'd never seen. The deed transfer was dated 4 months ago. The buyer was listed as Pendleton Logistics, LLC. The seller's signature was mine, or close enough to fool a notary who wasn't looking too hard. I photographed everything with my phone. The signature, the notary seal, the purchase price $40,000 under market value. The kind of deal that happens when people are in a hurry to move property quietly. Back at the house, I walked around the perimeter. The windows were dark, but there were fresh tire tracks in the driveway. Someone had been here recently. I tried the front door, locked, but the spare key was still under the 3rd flower pot on the back porch, the same place we'd hidden it when I was 12. Inside the house felt wrong, not just empty stripped. The furniture was gone. The family photos were gone. Even the scuff marks on the hardwood floors had been buffed out. But in the living room, faint rectangular outlines on the wall showed where picture frames used to hang, including the spot where my military portrait had been displayed for 19 years. They hadn't just sold the house. They'd erased me from it first. I stood in the empty living room as the sun set through bare windows, and for the first time since the phone call, I wasn't thinking about logistics or coordination or fixing things. I was thinking about war. I slept in the rental car that night, not because I couldn't afford a hotel I could, but because something about leaving felt like surrendering ground I might not get back. The car seat reclined enough to be tolerable. I'd slept in worse places. Aircraft carriers don't exactly offer luxury accommodations, and I'd done my share of overnight watches in cramped spaces. The rental's interior smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and someone else's coffee, but it was shelter. Around 2 a.m., headlights swept across the dashboard. I stayed low, watching through the gap between the seat and the door frame. A white cargo van pulled into the driveway of my grandmother's house. No, not my house anymore. The house that used to be mine. 2 men got out, baseball caps pulled low, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before. They opened the van's rear doors and started unloading wooden crates, military surplus style, the kind used for sensitive equipment transport. I counted 12 crates, each one small enough for 2 men to carry, but heavy enough that they had to stop and rest twice. They loaded everything into the garage through the side door, the same door I'd used to sneak in after curfew when I was 16. The whole operation took 23 minutes. I know because I timed it. After they left, I sat in the dark thinking about supply chains, about the logistics of moving something valuable without documentation, about why anyone would need to use a recently sold house as a temporary storage facility. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're not stable. Let it go." I stared at the screen until it went black. Then I opened my notes app and typed everything I'd seen: timestamps, license plate numbers, physical descriptions. The muscle memory of 19 years in military intelligence kicked in automatically. Someone knew I was here. Someone was watching. Someone wanted me gone badly enough to send threats at 2 a.m. The pieces started connecting themselves in my mind like a puzzle I'd been solving without knowing it. The forged signature on the deed, the erasure from the hospital contact list, the too-quick sale to a shell company, the mysterious cargo operation. They hadn't just cut me out of the family. They'd erased me on paper and rewrote my past to make room for something else, something that required a clean property with no inconvenient owners asking questions. I thought about the text message. "You're not stable." Such a specific word choice. Not crazy or unstable or mentally ill. Stable. The kind of language that appears in military fitness reports and psychological evaluations. The kind of language that appears in the medical records they'd have access to if they'd been managing my affairs while I was deployed. I turned the car's engine on and drove to the 24-hour diner on Wade Hampton Boulevard. Not to eat, my stomach was too twisted for food. But because I needed Wi-Fi and fluorescent lights and the kind of public space where people don't disappear quietly, time to find out exactly how deep this went. At 600 hours, I called Ava Renshaw from the diner parking lot. We'd been roommates at the University of South Carolina for 2 years before I enlisted. She'd gone to law school while I went to the Persian Gulf. We'd kept in touch through Christmas cards and the occasional email, but I hadn't talked to her in 3 years. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was already awake. Lawyers and military personnel, we keep similar hours. "Sarah, Jesus, what time is it?" "I need a lawyer, Ava, a good one." "Are you in trouble?" "I'm in something. I'm not sure what to call it yet." Silence on the other end. Then, "Where are you?" "Greenville. Can you meet me today?" "I'm in Columbia, but I can drive up. Give me 2 hours." Ava looked exactly the same as she had in college. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of controlled energy that made opposing counsel nervous. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from the courthouse, and the curious ears that seemed to follow legal conversations in small towns. I laid out everything: the forged deed, the hospital rejection, the midnight cargo operation, the anonymous text. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad in handwriting that looked like encrypted code. "This is federal," she said when I finished. "Property fraud, identity theft, possibly interstate commerce violations if they're moving contraband through that house. Can you handle federal cases?" "I can, but I want to bring in someone else, someone who specializes in digital forensics." She flipped through her phone contacts. "Rachel Miles, ex-NSA, now private sector. She's the best at tracing electronic footprints. Can we trust her?" She quit the NSA because they wanted her to do things that kept her awake at night. She's clean. Rachel arrived 2 hours later. Mid-30s, understated clothes, the kind of person who could disappear in a crowd if she wanted to. But her eyes were different. They moved constantly, cataloging details, processing information in real time. "Show me what you have," she said, without preamble. I pulled out my phone and walked her through the photos, the deed transfer, the signature comparison, the license plate numbers from the cargo van, the text message. Rachel studied each image like she was reading a foreign language. The signature forgery is amateur level. Whoever did this wasn't trying to fool experts, just notaries and clerks who see hundreds of these a month. Is that good or bad? It's traceable. Amateurs leave digital breadcrumbs. She looked up from the phone. Can you get me access to your military records? The official ones. What are you looking for? Someone used your identity to transfer property. I want to see if they used it for anything else. Federal contract security clearances, financial instruments. She paused. People who steal identities rarely stop at one crime. Ava leaned forward. What's your timeline for this? They're moving cargo through the house now. Whatever they're planning, it's active. I thought about the efficiency of the loading operation. This isn't their first run. Then we need to move fast, Rachel said, but carefully. If they're monitoring you, and that text suggests they are, we can't give them time to clean up their tracks. I looked at both women, Ava with her legal pad full of notes, Rachel with her phone already pulling up database access screens. Two people I barely knew, ready to go to war with people who'd been planning this for months. I have to ask, I said. I don't know how to fight this. I just know it's not right. Rachel looked up from her phone. You already did the hard part, you noticed. Most people would have seen the sold sign and driven away. You stayed. You watched. You documented. She gestured at my phone. You have evidence because you treated this like a military operation from the start. So what's the next step? We follow the money, Eva said. And we follow the paper trail. And we do it quietly, Rachel added. Until we're ready to make noise. I felt something I hadn't felt since leaving the hospital, momentum. The sense that I was moving forward instead of just reacting. When do we start? We already have, Rachel said, her fingers flying across her phone screen. Your signature comparison just triggered a record search. Give me 12 hours. Time to find out who was using my name. Rachel called me at 1800 hours the next day. We need to meet, now. She'd rented a conference room at the Hampton Inn neutral territory with Wi-Fi, and the kind of anonymity that comes with corporate beige decor. When I arrived, she had 3 laptops open and enough paperwork to stock a small office. Pendleton Logistics LLC, she said without looking up. Registered in Delaware 6 months ago. Single-member LLC, which means the ownership is hidden behind corporate veils. Ava spread documents across the table like she was dealing cards. But the deed transfer is where it gets interesting. Look at this. She placed 2 documents side by side. On the left, my enlistment paperwork from 2004 with my original signature. On the right, the property transfer from 4 months ago with what was supposed to be my signature. Even I could see the differences, the way I dotted my I's. The loop in my lowercase g, the angle of my S in Sarah. Whoever had forged it had gotten close, but not close enough. For a YouTube audience, this would be perfect, Ava said. Split-screen comparison, red circles around the inconsistencies, clear visual proof of fraud. It gets worse, Rachel said, pulling up a screen full of government contract databases. Your federal security clearance was used to bid on 3 different logistics contracts after your discharge, all tied to Pendleton Logistics. I leaned over her shoulder to read the screen. That's impossible. My clearance expired when I left active duty. According to the paperwork, it didn't. Someone filed an extension request using your credentials, made it look like you were doing contract work for the federal government. Rachel's fingers moved across the keyboard. Here's a Department of Defense supply chain contract for $2.3 million. Here's a Homeland Security logistics consultation for $800,000. And here's a Veterans Affairs medical supply contract for $1.6 million. The numbers hit me like cold water. $4.5 million in contracts, using my name. Using your clearance, your service record, your reputation, Rachel corrected. Someone's been building a federal contracting business with you as the front person, except you didn't know about it. Ava was already making notes. Identity theft for federal contracting is a felony. Each contract is a separate count. We're looking at decades of prison time for whoever did this. Who signed the contracts? Rachel pulled up another screen. That's where it gets personal. The signatory for Pendleton Logistics is listed as David Whitmore, advisory consultant. My father, I sat down hard in the conference room chair. He's been using my clearance to run federal contracts. And your property as collateral, Ava added. The house was probably listed as a business asset for loan applications. When you came home unexpectedly, it became a liability. So they erased me, I said quietly. They tried to, Rachel corrected, but they made mistakes. Look at this. She pulled up a series of email timestamps. The contract applications were submitted from IP addresses in Greenville, all during hours when you were deployed overseas. The timestamps don't match your deployment schedule. I studied the data. My father knew my deployment schedule. He got my letters. He knew when I'd be unreachable. He used that information to impersonate you with federal agencies, Ava said. Filed paperwork when you couldn't contradict it. Built a business when you couldn't object. Rachel leaned back in her chair. The midnight cargo operation makes sense now. If they're fulfilling federal contracts, they need staging areas, temporary storage, clean properties where they can move goods without scrutiny. But why sell the house if they needed it for operations? Because you came home, Ava said. You weren't supposed to be here. The stroke was unexpected. Your return was a problem they hadn't planned for. I thought about Jessica blocking me at the hospital, about the text message telling me to let it go, about the efficiency of the men loading crates in the dark. They've been doing this for months, I said, maybe years, building a business with my name while I was overseas. And when I came home, you became a witness to your own identity theft, Rachel finished. The person they were impersonating showed up in real life. So they tried to eliminate the witness, Ava said, made you look unstable, questioned your mental health, removed you from family emergency contacts, sold your assets, classic gaslighting tactics. I looked at the evidence spread across the table, forged signatures, fraudulent contracts, stolen identity, my own father's name on documents that turned my life into a business opportunity. How do we prove it? We already have, Rachel said. Federal databases keep backups of everything. I can trace every contract application, every clearance usage, every electronic signature. The digital trail is complete. And I can file federal fraud charges, Ava added. Identity theft, wire fraud conspiracy. The U.S. Attorney's Office loves cases like this, clear evidence, federal jurisdiction, multiple felonies. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside Greenville looked like the same small town I'd grown up in, but I wasn't the same person who'd left it 19 years ago. They turned me into a ghost so they could wear my face, I said. Time to haunt them back, Rachel said. The war was about to begin. Rachel's package arrived at the Hampton Inn the next morning, inside a nondescript Amazon box, a device the size of a thumb drive with a magnetic backing and a battery life that could run for 72 hours. Voice-activated proximity recorder, she explained over the phone. I used these during cybercrime investigations, when we needed to document conversations without warrants. Legal in South Carolina under one-party consent laws. Meaning as long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's admissible in court. You don't need everyone's permission. Ava had already confirmed the legal framework. South Carolina Statute 1730-15. One-party consent for audio recording. As long as you're present during the conversation or it's happening on property, you have legal standing to monitor. We're clean. Do I have legal standing? You're listed as the seller on the deed transfer. Until a court rules otherwise, you have an ownership interest in that property. That gives you surveillance rights. I drove to Maple Street at 2100 hours. The house was dark, but there were cars in the driveway, my father's pickup truck, and a sedan I didn't recognize. I parked 3 houses down in the shadow of an oak tree that had been there since my childhood. The recording device attached to the exterior electrical meter with a soft magnetic click. From there, it would pick up conversations within a 30-foot radius. All I had to do was wait. At 2147 hours, voices carried through the night air. Told you she'd be a problem. My father's voice sharp with frustration. She's been gone for 19 years. A voice I didn't recognize. Male, older, with the particular authority of someone used to giving orders. How much trouble can one person be? You don't know Sarah. She notices things. She remembers things. She was always too smart for her own good. Then we handle it like we discussed. If she finds out, discredit her. Use the file. The psychiatric file. Modified psychiatric file. Make it look like the discharge was more serious than reported. PTSD with psychotic features. Paranoid delusions. The kind of thing that makes testimony unreliable. I pressed myself against the car seat, barely breathing. They were talking about rewriting my military medical records, about making me look crazy to invalidate anything I might say in court. What about the contracts? We finished the current deliveries and shut down Pendleton. Move everything to the backup LLC. She can't trace what doesn't exist. And the house, burn it down if necessary. Insurance will cover the loss, but I don't think it'll come to that. She's one person against a system. Systems win. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes. Logistics details, delivery schedules, names of contacts I didn't recognize. I memorized what I could and trusted the recorder to catch what I couldn't. Over the next 4 nights, I returned to the same spot. The device captured everything: cargo delivery schedules, contract discussions, plans to eliminate evidence. But more importantly, it captured the casual way they discussed destroying my life. On the 3rd night, I photographed the cargo operation. The same white van, the same 2 men, the same wooden crates. This time, I used my phone's night mode and captured clear images of faces, license plates, and the loading process. Each photo was automatically time-stamped and geotagged. The 4th night, Jessica arrived. Dad, she's been asking questions at the bank about the mortgage payments, about who authorized the property sale. What did you tell them? That she's been unstable since her discharge, that the family had to take control of her finances for her own protection, but they're going to want documentation. Then we give them documentation. The modified medical file should be enough to establish incompetence. What if she lawyers up? She's a homeless veteran with a psychiatric history. What lawyer would take that case? I smiled in the darkness. They were about to find out. On the 5th night, I retrieved the recording device. 5 days of evidence, hours of conversation. Detailed plans to commit fraud, destroy evidence, and discredit a witness. Back at the hotel, I uploaded everything to an encrypted cloud server Rachel had set up. The audio files were automatically transcribed and time-stamped. The photographs were enhanced and cataloged. We have them, I told Ava over the phone. No, she corrected. We have everything we need to bury them. The surveillance phase was complete. Time for the next stage of the war. I requested my complete military medical records the next morning. As a veteran, I had the legal right to access everything: discharge summaries, psychological evaluations, treatment notes, the works. The Veterans Affairs Office told me it would take 3 to 5 business days for digital delivery. It took 2. Rachel and I met at her temporary office setup, a suite she'd rented at an extended stay hotel with enough bandwidth to run her forensic software. She'd turned the sitting area into a digital command center with monitors and hard drives arranged like mission control. Show me what you remember about your discharge evaluation, she said, pulling up my official records on her primary screen. Standard exit interview, psych evaluation flagged mild PTSD symptoms, nightmares, occasional anxiety, some difficulty with civilian transition. Nothing unusual for someone with my deployment history. I pointed to the screen. The evaluating psychologist recommended outpatient counseling and said I was fit for civilian employment. And that's what your original file shows, Rachel confirmed. Dr. Patricia Hayes, Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. Clean evaluation, mild adjustment disorder, full clearance for civilian life. So what's the problem? Rachel pulled up a second screen. This is the same file, but accessed through a different database portal, the one that gets queried when courts request psychiatric records for competency hearings. The difference was immediate and obvious. My file now contained additional entries dated after my discharge. Entries that painted a very different picture. Subject exhibits paranoid ideation regarding family members, delusional beliefs about property ownership, persistent conspiracy theories about identity theft. Recommendation: extended psychiatric hold for evaluation of psychotic features. I stared at the screen. Those entries weren't there 6 months ago. I know, because I can see when they were added. Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up server logs and metadata. These entries were inserted into your file 8 weeks ago, all on the same day, all from the same IP address. Can you trace the IP? Already did. It's registered to a private medical consulting firm in Colombia, Whitmore Medical Services. My father's name again. His signature on every piece of fraud. He owns a medical consulting company. Shell company registered 3 months ago, right around the time you got the call about your mother's stroke. Rachel pulled up corporate filing records, filed under expedited processing, paid extra fees to get it established quickly. Ava leaned over my shoulder to read the screen. They built the infrastructure to destroy your credibility before you even came home. This wasn't reactive, it was planned. How is that possible? Because they knew you'd come home if something happened to your mother, Rachel said. They planned for that contingency, set up the medical consulting company to give them access to VA databases, established the Shell LLC to receive your property, created the fake contracts to monetize your identity. I felt something cold settle in my chest. They used my love for my mother as a weapon. They used everything about you as a weapon, Ava corrected. Your service record, your medical history, your family loyalty. They turned your strengths into vulnerabilities. Rachel was still typing, diving deeper into the file modifications. The metadata shows these entries were copied from template files, boilerplate language for psychiatric incompetence determinations. Whoever did this wasn't even creative. They just inserted your name into pre-written evaluations. But why forge psychiatric records? Why not just rely on the property fraud? Because they needed you to be crazy, Ava explained. Not just wrong crazy. If you're mentally incompetent, nothing you say matters. Your testimony becomes unreliable. Your evidence becomes the ravings of a disturbed veteran. They forged your weakness, Rachel added, because strong women scare them. I looked at the fabricated entries on the screen. Words that painted me as delusional, paranoid, incompetent. Words that would follow me into any courtroom, any legal proceeding, any attempt to reclaim my life. They didn't just steal my house, I said quietly. They stole my name, my reputation, my right to be believed. Past tense, Ava corrected. They tried to steal those things, but we caught them. The server logs prove when the entries were added, Rachel said. The IP address proves who added them. The template files prove they were fabricated. Any competent judge will see this as fraud. What about the original evaluation? Still intact in the primary database. Dr. Hayes' original assessment is clean and professional. The forgeries only exist in the secondary system, the one that gets queried for legal proceedings. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Columbia looked like any other mid-sized southern city. But inside this hotel room, we were documenting the systematic destruction of a human identity. How many other people have they done this to Par? That's tomorrow's question, Rachel said. Today's question is, are you ready to fight back? I turned from the window. I've been ready since the night I slept in my car. Time to reclaim my name. Ava's law office in Columbia looked like a war room by the end of the week. Evidence boxes lined the walls labeled with military precision. Property fraud, identity theft, federal contract violations, medical record tampering. Each box contained hundreds of pages of documentation cross-referenced and indexed like a logistics operation. We're not just building a case, Ava explained as she organized exhibits on the conference table. We're building an airtight federal prosecution package. Every document needs to be bulletproof. Rachel had spent 3 days preparing her digital forensics affidavit. The document read like a technical manual: server logs, metadata analysis, IP address, traces, database, intrusion, evidence. But at its core, it told a simple story: someone had systematically altered my digital identity across multiple government systems. The beauty of digital evidence, Rachel said, reviewing her work, is that it's almost impossible to completely erase. Every login leaves a trace. Every file modification creates a timestamp. Every database query generates a log entry. She walked me through the forensic protocols she'd used. Chain of custody documentation for every piece of digital evidence. Hash verification to prove files hadn't been altered. Expert witness credentials that would satisfy any federal court. I've testified in over 200 cases, she said. Federal judges trust my methodology because I use the same standards the FBI uses. Everything I'm submitting has been verified using government-approved forensic tools. Ava was building the legal framework around Rachel's technical evidence. We have 4 primary charges: wire fraud, identity theft conspiracy, to defraud the federal government and obstruction of justice through evidence tampering. Why not file criminal charges directly? Because we're not prosecutors. We're civil attorneys seeking monetary damages and injunctive relief. She pulled up a legal brief on her laptop. But everything we're documenting will be forwarded to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. We're essentially doing their investigative work for them. The strategy was deliberate and methodical. We wouldn't reveal our evidence in open court, not yet. Instead, we'd submit everything under seal for the judge's preliminary review. Let the evidence speak before the defendants knew what hit them. The element of surprise is crucial, Ava explained. Right now, they think you're just a displaced veteran with a grudge. They don't know you have 19 years of military intelligence training. They don't know you've been conducting surveillance. They don't know you have a digital forensics expert and a federal litigation attorney. They think I'm crazy, which is exactly why this will work. They've gotten comfortable with their lie. They've repeated it so many times they've started believing it themselves. Rachel finished her affidavit that afternoon. 43 pages of technical analysis sworn under penalty of perjury, establishing that my medical records had been altered, my identity had been stolen, and my federal clearance had been misused for fraudulent contracts. This document alone is enough to trigger a federal investigation, she said. But combined with the surveillance evidence and the financial records, it's a complete prosecution package. Ava reviewed the filing one more time. We're requesting a preliminary hearing to determine the validity of the property transfer. Sounds routine, right? Like a simple deed dispute. But it's not. No, it's a federal fraud case disguised as a property dispute. The judge will review our evidence package privately under seal. If he finds probable cause, and he'll order a full investigation. What about my father, Jessica? The people helping them? They'll be notified of the hearing, but they won't see the evidence until the judge decides whether to unseal it. They'll walk into court thinking they're dealing with a simple property dispute. And then they'll discover they're facing federal felony charges. I looked at the boxes of evidence, the stacks of legal documents, the digital files that chronicled months of systematic fraud. 3 weeks ago, I'd been sleeping in my car, erased from my own life. Now I was preparing to wage legal war with the precision of a military operation. There's something else, Ava said quietly. Once we file this, there's no going back. Your family will never forgive you for exposing them. Your father could face 20 years in federal prison. Jessica could lose her career, her reputation, everything. They already took everything from me. I know, but this is your last chance to walk away. Take a settlement. Disappear quietly. Let them keep their lives while you rebuild yours somewhere else. I thought about the surveillance recordings, about my father's voice planning to destroy my psychiatric records, about Jessica laughing at me in the hospital, about the text message telling me to let it go. File the papers, I said. You're sure? I'm sure. They erased Sarah Whitmore once. Time to remind them she's still here. Ava picked up her phone to call the court clerk. Preliminary hearing in federal court, tomorrow at 0900 hours. The war was about to begin. The federal courthouse in Columbia was built from the same gray stone as every other government building, designed to intimidate and inspire respect in equal measure. I'd been in buildings like this before during security briefings and clearance reviews, but I'd never walked into one as a plaintiff. I wore my dress blues, not because I had to, but because I wanted them to see exactly who they were dealing with. 19 years of service ribbons lined my chest. The uniform still fit perfectly pressed and creased with military precision. Jessica was already seated at the defendant's table when I entered. She looked like she was attending a charity luncheon, perfectly styled hair designer suit, the kind of confident smile that came from never having been truly challenged. Her attorney was a local guy in an expensive suit, the kind who handled real estate disputes and traffic violations. They looked up when I walked in. Jessica's smile faltered for just a moment when she saw the uniform, but then she turned to whisper something to her lawyer. I caught the word desperate and the phrase military costume. My father wasn't there yet. Neither was anyone else from Pendleton Logistics. They probably thought this was just a property dispute, a minor inconvenience that would be resolved with a quick settlement. They were wrong. Ava entered behind me carrying a single briefcase and a sealed evidence package. She looked like she was built for federal court, sharp, professional, and absolutely prepared for war. All rise. The Honorable Judge Marcus Campbell presiding. The bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom as Judge Campbell took the bench. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with the kind of focused intensity that came from handling serious federal cases. His eyes swept the courtroom, cataloging details. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Whitmore versus Whitmore et al. Counsel, please state your appearances. Jessica's attorney stood first. Robert Hayes for the defendants, Your Honor. This is a simple property dispute regarding a deed transfer that was properly executed and recorded. Ava Rose. Ava Renshaw for the plaintiff, Your Honor. This is a federal fraud case involving identity theft, forged documents, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jessica's confident smile disappeared entirely. Her attorney looked like he'd been slapped. Counselor Renshaw, Judge Campbell said carefully, "These are serious allegations. Are you prepared to substantiate them?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have submitted a sealed evidence package for the court's review, including digital forensics analysis surveillance evidence and federal contract fraud documentation." Judge Campbell nodded to his clerk, who handed him a thick folder. "I will review this material before we proceed. In the meantime, let's hear the parties' positions." Jessica's attorney looked lost. "Your Honor, we were expecting a simple deed dispute. We're not prepared to address federal criminal allegations." "Then perhaps you should have researched your client's activities more thoroughly," Judge Campbell replied dryly. When Sarah was called to the plaintiff's table, Jessica actually laughed, not quietly loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's just a homeless veteran with trauma and a grudge," Jessica said to her attorney, though her voice carried across the courtroom. "She's been unstable since her discharge. She's probably having some kind of breakdown." The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Judge Campbell's expression could have frozen water. "Ms. Whitmore, did you just make a public statement about your sister's mental health in my courtroom?" Jessica's face went pale. "I was just explaining to my attorney." "You were just demonstrating exactly the kind of character that makes fraud allegations credible," Judge Campbell interrupted. "Counselor Hayes, control your client." Ava stood calmly. "Your Honor, the defendant's statement is particularly relevant, given that our evidence shows systematic attempts to portray the plaintiff as mentally incompetent through forged medical records." "Forged medical records?" "Yes, Your Honor, modified VA psychiatric files designed to discredit the plaintiff's testimony, all documented in the sealed evidence package." I watched Jessica's face as the reality hit her. This wasn't a property dispute. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a federal case with federal consequences. "This isn't a grudge," Ava continued, her voice calm and professional. "It's a paper trail, a documented pattern of fraud spanning multiple federal agencies and involving millions of dollars in fraudulent contracts." Judge Campbell was already opening the evidence folder. "I'll review this material immediately. Court will recess for 30 minutes. As he left the bench, Jessica turned to stare at me. For the first time since I'd come home, she looked scared. Good. She should be. When Judge Campbell returned to the bench, his expression had changed completely. The routine property dispute look was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of a federal judge who'd just reviewed evidence of serious crimes. "Counselor Renshaw," he said, "I've reviewed your evidence package. Before we proceed, I need to ensure we're following proper protocols for what appears to be a complex federal case." My father had arrived during the recess. He sat behind Jessica, looking exactly like what he was, a small-town man who'd gotten in over his head. He kept glancing at me, and I could see the moment he realized I wasn't the broken veteran he'd been expecting. "Your Honor," Ava said, "we'd like to request permission to reference Exhibit 14 from our evidence package. This is a multimedia presentation that was prepared by our digital forensics expert and has been authenticated according to federal evidence standards." "What type of multimedia presentation?" "Audio recordings obtained through legal surveillance, combined with document analysis, showing signature forgery and federal database tampering. All materials have been reviewed by certified forensic experts." Judge Campbell looked at Jessica's attorney. "Mr. Hayes, do you have any objection to the presentation of authenticated evidence?" Hayes looked like a deer in headlights. "Your Honor, we haven't had a chance to review." "The evidence was submitted under seal for preliminary review," Judge Campbell interrupted. "Standard procedure in federal fraud cases. I've reviewed it. It's properly authenticated. Do you have a legal objection?" No, Your Honor. Then proceed, Counselor Renshaw. Ava walked to the prosecution table and pulled out a laptop and a small projector. This presentation consists of 3 components: audio surveillance recordings, document analysis, and database forensics. All materials were obtained legally and have been verified by Dr. Rachel Miles, a certified digital forensics expert. The first image that appeared on the courtroom screen was a waveform, the visual representation of recorded audio. Even people who'd never seen one before could understand what it meant: voices captured on tape. This is audio recorded on November 15th at 2147 hours at 1247 Maple Street. Ava narrated. The recording was made using legal surveillance equipment in accordance with South Carolina one-party consent laws. The audio began to play. My father's voice filled the courtroom, clear and unmistakable. You don't know Sarah. She notices things. She remembers things. She was always too smart for her own good. Jessica's face went white. My father gripped the back of her chair. The unknown voice responded, "Then we handle it like we discussed. If she finds out, discredit her. Use the file. The psychiatric file. Modified psychiatric file. Make it look like the discharge was more serious than reported." The screen split to show Rachel's forensic analysis timestamps, voice pattern recognition, audio authentication protocols. Professional, technical, irrefutable. But it was the next part that made Judge Campbell's face go completely still. My father's voice, casual and confident. "We removed her from everything. She can't prove it. She's too broken." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of the recording. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. The screen changed to show the signature analysis, my real signature from military documents, beside the forged version from the property transfer. Red circles highlighted the differences, making the fraud visually obvious, even to someone with no handwriting expertise. Rachel's affidavit appeared on screen with key phrases, highlighted in yellow: inconsistent timestamp, forged credential use, unauthorized database access, systematic identity theft. This is a documented pattern of fraud. Ava continued, spanning multiple federal agencies and involving millions of dollars in fraudulent contracts. The defendants didn't just steal property, they stole an identity, forged federal documents, and attempted to destroy the victim's credibility through fabricated medical records. The audio continued playing in the background. More planning, more casual discussion of destroying evidence, more references to keeping me discredited and homeless. Judge Campbell finally spoke, his voice cutting through the silence. "Stop the presentation." The screen went black. The courtroom was absolutely quiet. "Mr. Hayes," Judge Campbell said, "does your client wish to make a statement regarding these recordings?" My father tried to stand, but Jessica pulled him back down. Hayes looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your Honor, we need time to review." "You need time to consult with criminal defense attorneys," Judge Campbell interrupted, "because what I just heard constitutes clear evidence of federal crimes." He turned to his clerk. "Clear the courtroom of all non-essential personnel. This hearing will proceed in camera due to the federal implications." As the press and spectators were escorted out, I remained seated at the plaintiff's table. Jessica was no longer looking confident. My father was no longer looking smug. They were both looking at 20 years in federal prison. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Campbell said, looking directly at me, "you may remain, everyone else out." The flash drive had done its job. The evidence was in play. The war was almost over. Judge Campbell waited until the last reporter was escorted through the courtroom doors before speaking again. The space felt different now, smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. What had started as a public property dispute had become something much more serious. Due to the federal referrals involved, he said, his voice carrying the weight of judicial authority, "This hearing will proceed in camera under sealed review. What we discuss from this point forward is classified pending federal investigation." The clerk locked the courtroom doors and activated the recording system that would create the official sealed transcript. In federal court, and camera proceedings were reserved for cases involving national security, ongoing criminal investigations, or matters too sensitive for public disclosure. We had achieved all three. I remained seated at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded, my posture straight. Military bearing in a civilian courtroom. Jessica was still at the defendant's table, but her perfectly styled confidence had cracked. She kept glancing at the locked doors as if looking for an escape route that no longer existed. My father sat behind her smaller somehow than he'd been 30 minutes ago. The casual arrogance I'd heard in the surveillance recordings was gone, replaced by the pale realization that federal crimes carry federal consequences. Counselor Renshaw. Judge Campbell continued, I've reviewed your evidence package in detail. The digital forensics analysis is compelling. The surveillance evidence is legally obtained. The federal contract fraud is documented across multiple agencies. He paused, looking directly at Jessica and my father. What I'm seeing here isn't a property dispute. It's a systematic criminal enterprise that happened to involve property theft as one component. Jessica didn't smile anymore. She couldn't. She was staring at the possibility of 20 years in federal prison. The real hearing was about to begin. Judge Campbell didn't deliver a dramatic verdict. Federal courts don't work that way. Instead, he did something more powerful. He set the legal machinery in motion that would grind through every aspect of their lives for the next several years. Based on the evidence presented, he said, consulting his notes, I'm ordering the following actions. First, all property transfers related to 1247 Maple Street are frozen pending federal investigation. The deed cannot be executed, the property cannot be sold, and no further transactions can occur without court approval. Jessica's attorney tried to object, but Judge Campbell continued without pause. Second, I'm forwarding this complete evidence package to the United States Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution consideration. The federal contract fraud alone represents potential violations of 18 different federal statutes. Third, I'm ordering an immediate audit of all federal contracts associated with Pendleton Logistics LLC and any related entities. The Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and Veterans Affairs will be notified of potential fraud in their contracting systems. My father was staring at the table, his face gray. Jessica was writing frantically on a legal pad, probably trying to figure out how to minimize her involvement. Fourth, Judge Campbell said, looking directly at me, the plaintiff's legal standing is restored on all assets, accounts, and properties that were transferred without proper authorization. Ms. Whitmore, you are hereby recognized as the rightful owner of 1247 Maple Street pending resolution of the criminal proceedings. The words hit me like a physical weight. Legal standing. After months of being erased, discredited, and dismissed, I officially existed again. Mr. Hayes, Judge Campbell addressed Jessica's attorney, I strongly recommend your clients obtain criminal defense counsel immediately. The federal investigation will begin within 48 hours. Your Honor, Hayes said desperately, if we could discuss a settlement. There are no settlements in federal criminal cases, Counselor. Your clients can cooperate with investigators or face the full weight of federal prosecution. Those are their only options. Judge Campbell gathered his papers. This court will remain seized of the civil matters pending resolution of the criminal investigation. The property remains under federal protection. As he left the bench, Jessica finally looked at me. Not with the smug confidence she'd worn in the hospital, but with the hollow expression of someone who just realized the game was over. She'd called me a homeless veteran with trauma and a grudge. She was half right. I did have a grudge, and I just won. 3 days later, I stood inside 1247 Maple Street again. The house was still empty. The federal marshals had sealed it as evidence while the investigation continued. But I had the key now. Legal standing meant legal access. The afternoon light came through the bare windows, differently than it had during those first desperate days. Then it had illuminated loss. Now it illuminated possibility. I walked to the living room mantel, where family photos had hung for decades. The wall was still bare, the rectangular outlines still visible where frames had been removed. But I'd brought something with me. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a small frame photograph, my official military portrait, from my promotion to lieutenant commander. 19 years of service compressed into a single image. I placed it carefully on the mantel centered where the largest family photo used to hang. The house felt different with that one image in place. Not complete, that would take time, but no longer empty. They had tried to delete me, erase me from deeds and medical records and family contact lists. They'd tried to replace me with a version they could control, a broken veteran, a convenient signature, a ghost they could manipulate. But I had receipts. Digital forensics and surveillance recordings, and federal contract fraud spanning multiple agencies. I had evidence that would put them in prison for decades. More importantly, I had silence mine. The kind of quiet strength that comes from 19 years of military service, from knowing how to wait, how to watch, how to strike when the moment is right. I walked to the front door and turned back once. The military portrait caught the afternoon light, solid and present and real. Then I walked out the front door, no longer erased. Behind me, the house waited, ready to become a home again. The war was over. I had won.